Today we will be discussing Agile Proposal Development presented by our special guest, Neal Levene, and hosted by Amjad Nagra, CEO of Zbizlink. I'm Kevin Zusai, and before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Zbizlink. Zbizlink is a dynamic cloud-based proposal management tool that helps proposal teams automate the proposal process. It's engineered to ease government and commercial proposals and to support the full business development lifecycle, automation, and AI, so your team can finish proposals 3 times faster and go home. I'm really excited about today's webinar, and if you'd like to view it again with a colleague later, it's actually going to be recorded and shared on the Zbizlink YouTube channel. So make sure you check that out. Lastly, we'd love to hear from you, and if you have any questions or would like to schedule a demo of Zbizlink, you can email us at support@zbizlink.com. Now let's get started. Welcome, Neal.
Hey, thanks for inviting me to talk to you today. I'm Neal Levene. I'm Director of Proposal Management at Siemens Government Technologies. I have an interesting presentation for you today that I hope you'll enjoy. Let's get started. As I said, I'm Neal Levene. I've been doing proposals for about 30 years, but let's get right to what we're going to talk about today, and that is Agile and Scrum as it relates to the proposal process. I'm also going to show you a demo of Trello, which is a free tool that kind of supports doing this. And usually I leave a little bit of time for some question and answer that we'll do here during this presentation. And so let's get started here. So in this presentation, I'd like to change your perspective. So describe to yourself what you see in this picture, and I'll give you a couple of seconds to kind of look at this picture and think to yourself what you see. But I'm going to change the orientation of this picture a little bit and ask you if, when I change this orientation, does this change anything for you?
Well, it does. See how clear view I had before, and now it is I have to do little extra effort to understand this picture.
And if I change the perspective even more, do you begin to see something else in the picture?
Yes.
And so a lot of people begin to see kind of the face that's outlined in this picture, and you can kind of see the eyes here and the face and kind of the hair that's here that's also reflected in the river. And sometimes if you look really closely, you can see something else, that there's another face out here in the kind of the background of this picture. And the idea here is to keep your mind open and search for opportunities to use the unexpected and unseen to your advantage. And so what I want to start kind of launching into the real material here is to start with talking about the waterfall method that's usually used in software development, and systems have been built for years using the standard systems development lifecycle model. Each step is performed serially and completes before the next step begins, and it has many weaknesses, yet this is exactly how we develop our proposals, with the same potential issues and uncertainties. Typically when we do a proposal, we go from capture to storyboarding to writing and reviewing, and then finally submitting the proposals, the same as is typically done in a systems development methodology. And there's a lot of problems with this kind of methodology. The number one problem with the traditional model is that the earlier you are in the process, the less clear your requirements are. And while you're doing your planning, storyboarding, designing, you know the least about the entire effort. As the proposal proceeds, the proposal requirements or RFP frequently changes via amendments or solution changes or team learning or strategy change. Executives or proposal owners may have sporadic or almost no involvement in the proposal preparation except during reviews. On most efforts, their involvement tends to increase towards the later phases when the impact is minimal. There's a big gap during the middle of the proposal development. Estimates of what it's going to take to complete the proposal, both in terms of resources and schedule, is inaccurate because both because of unclear requirements and changing requirements. So there's the estimates aren't accurate. Last minute corrections are really difficult due to the sequential nature of the process rather. And since reviews are being done at discrete points in time, all delays eat into the review time. Moreover, all work stops during reviews, waiting for reviews to finish and then pick up again for remediation. So there's not much time for testing in QA. And since reviews come so late in the process, once defects are found, there's not much time to fix the defects that are found. Moreover, you may be too far along to repair the defects that have been found. The methodologies associated with these sequential processes frequently focus on lots of process documentation in conjunction to the main product. As a result of all of these issues, schedules are always slipping and frequently there's cost overruns associated with that. And lastly, there are lots of midnights and weekend work before a final delivery. Sounds pretty bad, I would assume, but I'm not here just to talk about problems. I'm really here to talk about a different way of approaching proposal development and how to implement this in a way incrementally, such that you don't have to necessarily implement the whole process. So let's talk about what Agile is. And Agile is based on an iterative and incremental development where requirements and solutions evolve through collaboration between self-organized cross-functional teams. So kind of breaking that down, it's iterative, it's incremental, requirements and solutions evolve, it's collaborative, teams self-organize, and you usually use cross-functional teams. So in February of 2001, there were 17 independent software practitioners who wrote the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, and it had 12 principles. And I've adapted them slightly here to relate to proposal development. So let's look at the first principle. And that principle is that the highest priority is the proposal owner or the proposal reviewer's satisfaction. And that is through early and continuous delivery of valuable proposal content. So the net here is that we're going to focus very highly on continually delivering proposal content. That's what we're going to measure ourselves on. We are going to be excited about and organized around handling changing requirements. When an amendment comes out, we're going to be prepared for this. We know it's coming, and we are going to be focused on handling this when it happens. We're going to deliver completed content frequently. In fact, we're going to be focused on daily delivery of assignments. Executives, writers, and subject matter experts are going to work together daily throughout the effort. We're going to build the effort around motivated individuals and trust them to get the job done. We're not going to be micromanaging people. There is an emphasis in Agile on face-to-face interactions, ideally around kind of this common whiteboard. I have to admit, and those of us in the COVID era have experienced that it's pretty easy to do things remotely. But those of us who've kind of locked ourselves in war rooms to do proposals have to admit that there is something special about the face-to-face interaction that sometimes produces better results. The measure that is going to count in this process is finished content, and that's what we're going to measure ourselves on. A pace and rhythm is going to be established that can be continued almost indefinitely. And we're going to be talking about that in just a second. Attention to technical excellence and good design is going to be a priority. Excuse me. The simpler the system, the better. We're going to look at simplicity. And teams are going to be self-organized versus being managed, and we'll talk about how this works in just a second. And then lastly, you're going to need to continually conduct lessons learned and adjust how you work to produce better results. So those are the principles that we're going to organize ourselves around. And there's many benefits to doing this. Bad approaches are identified early and corrected. Decisions are made quickly. Collaboration is extremely high. Change is recognized as inevitable and embraced and even planned for. Final products contain the most useful and necessary elements. Quality is greatly improved. There's usually early and predictable delivery. Risks are greatly reduced. There is a much greater allowance for change, and there is much more focus on the business value. So if that is what Agile is, let's just talk for a second. What is Scrum? And Scrum is a subset of Agile. It's a process framework. It uses sprints, or I'll call them iterations, to accomplish work. So I've just given you a lot of preliminary information. Let's really get into the meat of what we're talking about here. And let's talk about what Scrum is. And let's start by talking about what the roles are of Scrum as it relates to proposals. So in proposals, one of the important roles is the product owner, or the proposal owner, you could call them. This is the executive or the capture manager in this scenario. This person owns the proposal. The second person is the Scrum manager. You could call them the proposal manager, who now facilitates the process instead of straight out managing. The next role is the team. This is pretty much everyone else. These are the people that work on the proposal, except the stakeholders. Now, stakeholders are observers. They generally are quiet, except when they're giving advice. So those are the roles involved in this system. There are a number of artifacts that are useful to understand. The first one is the proposal backlog, the product backlog, you could call it. And this is everything that needs to get into the proposal, everything that needs to get done. It is a little bit like a compliance matrix, but it is task-oriented. So that is the proposal backlog. This is everything that needs to get done in the proposal. The next thing is the sprint goal, or the iteration goal. And this is the main objective of what needs to get done in the current iteration, which can be, and this iteration can be of any duration, but in my experience for proposals, 1 or 2 weeks work very well. In software, other durations are generally used. You also have a sprint backlog, an iteration backlog. This is what you're trying to accomplish in that 1 or 2 week time period. It's a subset of the proposal backlog. Another artifact is the block list. This is a list of obstacles that you're currently facing. And the last artifact that I want to talk about is the version, the increment, which is the version of the shippable proposal that's being developed. So this is an actual piece of the proposal that's finished and ready to ship. So I've talked about roles, I've talked about artifacts. Let's talk about several meetings that occur, and let's ignore the time frames for a minute. The first one that I want to talk about is the sprint planning meeting. This happens at the beginning of the iteration and talks about what's going to occur in the upcoming sprint. The second meeting, probably the most important meeting, is a daily meeting that's about 15 minutes where you discuss just 3 things. What was done yesterday, what's going to be done today, and what's in the way of accomplishing work. Nothing else is discussed in this meeting, and it's a very different meeting than the laborious, sometimes futile, hour-long status meetings that some of you are more regularly accustomed to. So that's the daily Scrum or the daily status meeting, whatever you want to call this meeting. There's a sprint review, which is where all products developed in the sprint are reviewed for quality assurance. And there's another meeting called the sprint retrospective, which is a lessons learned meeting where you look at the process. So the sprint review looks at the product, and the sprint retrospective looks at the process. So I've talked about roles, artifacts, and meetings. The next thing to talk about is the process, how these things fit together. And I like to use a different diagram to talk about these things. So let's talk about how all of these things fit together. You start with a proposal owner, who is the master of acceptance criteria for the proposal. This is the executive or the capture owner. The proposal owner creates the proposal backlog in conjunction with other people usually, but they really are the owner of the proposal backlog, what needs to go into the proposal. The proposal backlog is an input into the sprint planning session, all of the various sprint planning sessions. And in that during the print, I'll try this one more time. During the sprint planning session, you determine what and how the work is going to be done. This forms the sprint backlog, what is going to be done during that sprint, and it's important that there is a clear definition of what done means. That is the definition of done. You figure out what's going to be done and how you're going to know that it's going to be done, and that leads you into the sprint or the iteration. So this planning session becomes input for the sprint where the work is actually done. For a typical 30-day turn on a proposal, I typically use a 1-week sprint for the iteration, and that's worked very well. If I'm doing capture work or business development, 2-week sprints work pretty well. And this is much shorter than what's typically used in most software development efforts. But for a proposal, and you have 30 days, 4 sprints work really well. So every day there's a daily Scrum meeting where a lot of times a task board is updated and impediments are discussed. At the end of each week or the sprint iteration, a review takes place looking at the products produced during that sprint. And the owner may be asking at this point, do we have a shippable finished proposal? If the answer is yes, you're done. And you have a finished proposal. If the answer is no, you have a sprint retrospective, a lessons learned, and start back at the sprint planning session. So you, in a particular proposal life cycle, you can go through this entire life cycle with sprint versions, going from envisioning the proposal, getting your plan together, collaboratively writing the proposal, and doing iterative versions to producing the proposal, and then decommissioning your team, and doing all of these things with sprints. So if that's the overall process, I want to make a point to some of you who typically at this point, with a live audience, I usually get a, this will never work in our organization, or I could never change my organization to do these kind of things. And I think it's important to realize that it's not an all or nothing affair. And there are many elements of Agile Scrum that are useful to implement, even if you don't implement the whole process. And in fact, in many organizations where I've done this work, I don't implement the full system, or don't even tell them that I'm doing Agile at all, and instead I just implement pieces and processes of this, because there are elements of this that in and of themselves make a tremendous difference just implementing those things. And what I want to talk about here is what those things are. So let's talk first about an effective morning status meeting, the 15-minute stand-up or daily Scrum meeting, whatever you want to talk about. And one of the most effective practices you can do is improving your daily status meeting. And the most important element is time boxing it to 15 minutes or less, and separating working elements, like the working elements, out of it and reducing it to a true status meeting, so that you get people to focus on status and focus on accountability. During this meeting, you focus on what was promised, what was delivered, and what is promised for the upcoming day, and what is blocking progress. Anything that requires discussion should be scheduled for a later meeting with just those parties. This meeting should be very, very crisp. So let's kind of model what a typical meeting should be like. It's 8 a.m., it's time for the morning stand-up meeting, and let's see what this meeting might be like. So I'm going to first do somebody who's finished all of their tasks and there's no issues. And they say, yesterday I committed to task 1, which I finished. Today I'm committing to tasks 2 and 3. I don't have any blockers. John, why don't you go next? So 1, notice that all tasks are broken into 1-day periods of time. Every piece of work is finished in 1 day. This increases velocity a lot, and this is the perfect status. They committed to the task, and they finished the task, and tomorrow they're committing to 2 tasks, and there's no problems. So they go on to the next person. Who says, thanks, Alice. Yesterday I committed to task 9 and 10. I finished task 9, but I need 2 more hours to work on task 10. Today I'll finish task 10 and task 12. I don't have any blockers. So sometimes there can be a very negative reaction to someone who didn't finish their tasks. And on one of the teams that I was managing, somebody who gave this status would regularly get booed. The peer pressure to finish promised tasks got so immense that as the proposal manager, the Scrum manager, whatever you want, label you want to put on these people, changed from being the air traffic controller to being this facilitator, and the team would put such a high pressure on people, much more pressure than I ever exerted as a manager myself. You almost had to slow people down and say, look, John had a funeral yesterday. Let's have some compassion. Let's have some compassion here. But you kind of end up with these salad bar rules that you can take whatever you want, but you have to eat everything you take. And it changes on a well-functioning team the dynamic drastically. And I think outside of kind of managing this kind of situation very positively, and the velocity of the work that you can finish changes very quickly. And from a management perspective, I think very positively. So here's somebody who didn't finish some of their work and needs to continue it on to the next day. Let's move on to another person who says, thanks, John. Yesterday I committed to finish reviews on all tasks in the QA bin, which I did. Today I don't have any availability to work on this project, and I'm not committing to any tasks today. I don't have any blockers. I think Bill is the last person to speak. So this person was a QA person who's doing QA every day as work is being finished. And notice she's not taking any work today, and that's completely acceptable. You don't have to pull down work if you don't have time to work on something today, and that's totally acceptable. If you're in a matrixed organization, one day you don't have time to do any work, you just say, I'm not taking anything, and you move on. So we're going to move on to the next person. Says, thanks, Betsy. Yesterday I committed to task 3 and 4, which I did. Today I will work on task 6 and 7. Task 8 is still blocked, and I've scheduled a meeting following our stand-up to discuss the issues. I think that concludes our stand-up this morning. So this person has a blocker, which is being scheduled for discussion right after the stand-up. Notice that everyone is standing up, which is another best practice. I used to run a stand-up with 15 attendees, and we regularly finished in about 12 minutes. About a third of the days, there was a need for a 30-minute follow-up meeting where issues were discussed, and only relevant people would stay for that. This is a far cry from the painful, wasteful stand-ups that I typically attend on many proposals. Something like this is a must adopt if you want to save some precious time on your proposals. There are a lot of benefits. Work is delivered and finished every day. There are no avenues for escape. The team self-enforces. The status meetings are separated from working meetings, and it works well with matrix and distributed teams. The team self-organizes, and the productivity usually increases. It's just amazing. It's really worth a try on one of your proposals. So another recommendation I have for you is to move away from typical color reviews. Color reviews are highly ineffective for a variety of reasons. Few processes work less well than the color team process. And there are a lot of reasons that the process doesn't work. People don't think like evaluators, they don't know the expectations, they don't prepare for the reviews, there's a lot of organization dynamics that come into play, the schedule and timing, and they're either too early or they're too late, people don't honor the schedule for them, there's no guidance and training, mitigation isn't done very well. People give recommendations that can't be that aren't fully fleshed out. The advice isn't actionable, and there's really insufficient QA. And I have a slide on each of these items that I'm just going to kind of go through slower. Pause the presentation if you really want to look at these things. But there's, I think, 47 of these, 37 of these. We'll see when we get to the end of this how many there are. But color teams have a lot of problems. I would love to one day do a presentation just on color teams and their problems, because they're very, very prevalent, and they're a cornerstone of how we review our proposals, and they have so many problems. And I'm seeing as I get to the end of these list of problems that 47 is the number of problems I've identified here. So hey, I don't want to just list problems. Let's talk about what you can do in a agile-like way to improve the process. And that's to review like an evaluator. And your first review should be a compliance review where you audit based on a Section L or the instructions if you're in either a commercial or a government situation. Second review is a scoring review based on M or what the evaluation criteria are. The third review is a quality review. Color reviews just are not generally effective. In a typical 30-day turn with 7-day iterations, that gives you 4 opportunities to do reviews. And instead of calling them color reviews, excuse me, it is better to turn every Friday into your review day at the end of your iteration, or to review every day as people turn in work, even better. And if you know, depending on your turn-in date, you might have to do in your last iteration, change your review just a little bit. But why not do your reviews based on your iterations, where you have you're reviewing your storyboards, your first writing iteration, your second writing iteration, and then you're reviewing your productions. And now your dates don't change, because Friday comes when Friday comes, and you're reviewing whatever you finished, not any kind of crazy red team thing, which is different in every single company that I've ever been at, and you know, creating new colors, Auburn team, and all that kind of thing. So it works well also on more complicated proposals where you have multiple months and you're trying to do reviews, and you have longer iterations with more complicated documents. You can still break down your iterations and review things as they're done and as the document gets integrated, and work the reviews in the same way. What are the benefits of doing something like this? Work can be reviewed daily, continuously, with increased opportunities to improve quality. So I think that's a best practice that you can borrow from Agile. Another thing that you can borrow from Agile is using a task board, either electronically or otherwise. So what is a task board? Here's a picture of one that's a manual one. The task board is a visual display of progress of the team during a period of time, an iteration or a sprint. And so you see 4 primary columns here. Next, that's what's available for work. Now, that's what's being worked. Blocked, that's what cannot be worked. And done, that's what's finished. And each post-it note is representative of a task. And you move your post-it notes down the columns as you finish them. People love moving these post-it notes. There's something just visceral about moving these notes. Now, I happen to live in the DC metropolitan area where it's very humid, and if you are work in a building where the air conditioning's turned off for the weekend, or it's very humid, sometimes you come in Monday morning or after a very humid day and you find all of your post-it notes on the floor. It's very disheartening to have that experience. So a tool that I'd recommend that you look at, it's not the only tool that does it, but it's a tool that I've had a lot of success with, is Trello. It's a cloud-based sticky note tool. It's free for use. I've never had to use anything that wasn't part of the free portion. I enforce a no proprietary information on cards rule, thus there's no security concerns with it. Here's an electronic version of this board where you have the same columns. There's other tools that do this. It's a place to track the information. And here's the title, here's your columns. It's basic. It's a very basic tool. Here you see goals, pending, in progress, QA, done, and blocked. And if you look at the cards, a great card has a name, and I keep things very, very simple. All tasks must be completed in a day or less. I don't clutter up the card with much information. I use a label to match it back to the sprint goal, and I assign one person who's the task order. And guess what? That's it. Just simple. You can click on a task and enter all kinds of additional information, and I don't use any of this. I keep it very simple, and by keeping it simple, the system actually gets used. This tool can do amazing things. I don't use any of it. So let's talk of a potential workflow. A best practice is that before the stand-up, all participants update the board, move the cards to the correct places. And guess what? That's the end of the workflow. It just doesn't get any simpler than that. There are tons of ways to make it more complicated, but I advise against every last one of the can you do this, can you do that. You can integrate it with Outlook. You can do all kinds of things. You can do, it has a tremendous amount of power beyond what I've said. Don't use any of that stuff. Just keep it simple, make it into an electronic note card, and people will actually use it. Your IT team probably won't give you a heartache. Enforce the no proprietary information on the cards, and you have no information out there that should get you in trouble. So what's the benefit of using something like this? Blockers and late work is identified in Mitigator. The human nature is to move those cards. People just love moving those cards. The system is simple. Let me give you one last area that Agile kind of introduces that is very effective, is this continual lessons learned process. And this is a process that I've developed. When I had my own company, I used to use this for performance evaluations for my employees. It is so lightweight. It is so effective. It is such a good way to do lessons learned. It has the acronym KISS: Keep, Improve, Start, and Stop. It is very positive way to do lessons learned because it starts with two positive questions. You start by asking, what am I going to keep? What am I doing that I should keep doing? If you think about it, most of what you do is good, and you want to keep doing these good things. So start with that question. Secondly, what should you improve? Most of the things you're doing, you just need a little tweak and you want to improve them. So that's the second question you ask. Third question you ask is, what should I start doing that I'm not doing? And the last question is, what should you stop doing that you're doing that you should no longer do? And so what I typically do is I'll send out an email and say, answer these 4 questions, not these survey instruments that have hundreds of questions that people don't feel like answering, that are very constraining. When you ask these 4 questions, people tend to answer where the heat is, and they're willing to answer these 4 questions. So I get the answers back in an email. I take everyone's responses, I put it in a PowerPoint presentation along these 4 questions. Sometimes you have to kind of sanitize the answers to make sure nobody's names are in it or it doesn't identify any particular person. Put it in a PowerPoint presentation and send it out to everyone so that everyone's voice is now heard on the project. And then you call a meeting where you pick a couple of the ones that have some heat behind them and you do business process improvement in the hour or 2 meeting, where you start now working on something that requires some business process improvement. It works so well. Do yourself a favor and try it. It's something that you could stop in the middle of a meeting and just say, hey, let's do something real fast. What should we keep? What should we improve? What should we start? What should we stop? You could do it in 15 minutes. It's portable. It is really a good process. You should really try it. I found that it works better than anything that I've tried before. It's the thing that I use to get my professional certification on. It really is a good process. It supports continuous improvement. It's lightweight process improvement. So I've given you 4 things that you can adopt if you didn't want to adopt the full process. You're going to face some challenges. Sometimes your organization has ISO procedures in place that sometimes precludes moving immediately to ISO. More likely than not, your ISO processes call out review processes, but not what happens between those processes or how to get to those processes. You might have to work within these older structures or work to change your ISO processes to get better working processes. Another challenge you might face is your executive teams and others just love the color team process, even though there is not widespread agreement over what goes into these reviews. It just sounds very exciting and covert to participate in these reviews. And a lot of times your executives hold on to them with a lot of passion, even though they never turn up to these reviews prepared. It's ironic. So sometimes there's a challenge to get change in that area. Software that you might want to use to enable your process can have problems getting through your firewalls. Moreover, you may not want your proprietary information out on the cloud or outside your network. Adoption of yet another tool is frequently a challenge as well sometimes. Lastly, stakeholders with their myriads of opinions and goals are going to have different relative interests in changing. Sometimes it's like herding cats. There is a lot of training that needs to occur. The processes of accountability take some time to instill. So if those are 4 challenges, what are the solutions to those? It's really to start small with what works, not to boil the ocean. It sounds, I wish there was some magic bullets to fix these problems. Utilizing agile processes in the area of proposals is still fairly new. I've had a lot of success doing so, but what overcomes the challenges most really is starting small with what works, getting the camel's nose under the tent and building from success. What is best about Agile is that its foundation is on common sense processes, and if you follow your common sense, you will overcome most obstacles. So I usually end my presentation by saying, are there any questions? I happen to have some questions for our host, and I would be happy to answer any of their questions. So if I can kind of take the first opportunity to ask a question, I'm very interested in how does a tool like Zbizlink support the proposal development process, and maybe that would be a good place to start in this question.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I think it's very, very much informative. And as both we are agile processes oriented guys, I love to go on agile, and I think I would like to show you how Zbizlink is structured with agile. So let me now switch the gear, put myself on the presenter side, and share screen with you. So the very first thing that I think you may ask me the first question. Would you say your question?
Oh, I'm sorry. I asked you, how does a tool like Zbizlink support a proposal development process?
Well, Zbizlink support the processes of proposal development from begin to end. It covers up not only the proposal, which subsections are like capture management, planning about your opportunities in future, so on, many different things. So at high level, talking about proposal processes, it helps you to review your RFPs. If you see the screenshot I shared, you look from your RFP where you make decision, go no go decision for your each bid. And this process has a huge life cycle in Zbizlink. It captures the information. You find that your team's strengths and weaknesses. You score your capability of your team, including your proposed key personnel, if this is related to human resources, or your subcontractors. So each of them, their capability can be scored in the system, and then it gives you statistical review process to make a decision based upon how the scoring has been done. So that the whole thing is captured under bids no-go decision. And after you made that decision, and yes, we are going after this opportunity, then Zbizlink take you from there. It gives you a complete proposal management plan and requirement compliance matrix. You start with your kickoff meeting where you can set up the instruction and set up your template that you want to use for your proposal response. It helps you to build up your win strategy and theme, and then schedule from there. And for each of those requirements are the responses that you need to write down. The system give you ability to assign the timeline when that task or that requirement response should be done, who should be done, who is going to work on it, how many hours this resource will take. All of that planning you do after, or even before working on a proposal program. So while in this process, it helps you to take you throughout until you are 100% ready to start writing proposal responses. And after that, when you are, then Zbizlink help you to build your executive summary. Even if you have executive summary from your company assets like organizational documents, so you can import your executive summary from your organizational documents and use that, and using with the dynamic variable, which means like you can easily manage as a template, and then it change the content according to your current proposal, your client information, your partners information, your team information. All the information can be automatically populated from the current proposal with the template. And from there, then you go through, you track the process of your proposal. And if you are seeing that your team members, they are up to date, or if something missing, so on, that you can also send the reminders to them. And your SMEs and your proposal teams, they can follow the processes and start writing proposal responses. But strengthening the collaboration, this tool giving you ability to lock down in specific requirements. So let's say you had the proposal 100 of different requirements, and you assigned 20 requirement to each of your SME, and then when they start editing individual requirement, it during edit mode, it lock down that specific requirement response. While other people, they can still review the information, they still can read the whole response as a one document, but editing goes by check-in and check-out for individual people. So that you can have strengthen your collaboration among your team members. So it gives throughout the measurement of different steps and tracking the progress, and then finally deliver your proposal in the required format. Currently, it is supporting Microsoft Word document as a output proposal response. That's all for this question.
Oh, great. So how does Zbizlink support the process of Agile?
Well, as I said, I'm also Agile. I love Agile, so I wanted to get that Agile into a system. So I currently just show you one screen where you see that each of my proposal, which is showing here as a the summary of the progress of this specific proposal. It showed me that like 92% is done, and there are some tasks that still need to be done from the progress wise. But when I go to individual task, I can see from my action that, okay, when I click instance response, because this was assigned to another resource, and it showed me that this is done or in progress or new. So the system is giving ability to, when I'm assigning these tasks to my SMEs or my proposal writers, as soon someone start writing proposal response, they can change the status to in progress, and when they're done, then the system automatically mark that is 100% done and progress change. And while other side, if you see that this resource is pending, this task has not completed, some of the task, like let's see this task is not completed, so if I want to send out a reminder, I can send out a reminder to this resource, hey, this task is not completed, you need to complete. Overall, I can see that my tasks are there. So this is one part of managing those tasks in the format of agile processes. While on other side, the same system giving us the ability to start like complete life cycle, which is the team assignment, then the action, which is like who is doing what, and then a review process. So you can run all of them side by side. So each role, as you said that, like green team, blue team, this is just nomenclature. This is just a naming convention you want to use. You can have agile scrum master. You can have a product owner. It's up to you what the team structure you want to define. But thing is that your proposal review team in this system, they cannot be in two roles. If let's say if I am proposal review person, this system would not let me to be in a proposal writing team, and it will force me to, and like you see, and currently I am in proposal writing team. So if I go to my proposal review, I would not be seeing that link where I can go and review the proposal progress. But the source who has a proposal review team or is in a proposal review team, they will be seeing all of those requirement responses written by the individual SMEs. And what they will do, they will only leave the feedback. They will only leave their comments or anything that related to specific requirement or specific section of the response or whatever. So having said that, system is managing the processes, and it is allowing you to separate individual roles and then collaborate among them. So if your role is team proposal writing team, they will be specifically dedicated for putting the contents together, managing the schedule, and executing all those tasks according to the timeline. While on the other side, the same time, even daily or weekly or after 2 weeks, it's all up to you how you want to, as a proposal manager or proposal owner, how you want to review the progress. But your proposal review team, they continuously, maybe on 2 times a week or at the end of the week Friday, they can go and review the proposals contents, and they can leave their comments or anything that we can expect from them. So that's how this system integrate multiple processes, including project schedule, all of my timelines that has been put in schedule. I can see here. So my company organizational level, like my calendar is synced here. I can see my dates and other things together. So if I consolidate my response, yes, Zbizlink support agile processes in proposal management process. It brings together multiple designations. Either you use as a agile scrum master or product owner. It gives you ability to track the progress of the proposal, and while on the other side, it gives ability of your the reviewer team to just review the contents and not edit the contents. So they separate those roles so that you can have more like better quality of your contents.
Yeah, I can definitely see how this combines a lot of the functions together and allows you to do something like enter your whole proposal backlog into your list here as tasks, and then allows you to watch the progress in the same way, you know, where I kind of showed Trello as just a very simple tool. This allows you to integrate it all the way through the entire process to your writing, and integrate it with your review, and integrate it with more of your functional tasks. So not only does it show you moving through kind of the formal agile tasks, it integrates it to the functional tasks that you need to do to actually execute your work. It's an interesting offering.
It is. And by the way, I think as you are dealing